book called Ichher Gaach Ebong Onnannora by Aparajita Dasgupta. And Sharmila Tagore will be launching the book, which will happen in 5 minutes. And before that, I just wish to make another announcement. Those wishing to attend Farida Khanum's performance at G.D. Birla Sabhagar tomorrow at 7 o'clock are welcome to collect some very limited passes from the Game Plan office on Shakespeare Sarani or the venue itself, which is G.D. Birla Sabhagar, the ticket counter at G.D. Birla Sabhagar. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly welcome onto the stage Srimati Sharmila Tagore, Srimati Aruna Chakravarti, and Srimati Sangeeta Datta. But before they begin their session, there's the book launch, as promised, of Ichher Gaach Ebong Onnannora. To do the honors, Srimati Krishna Basu. Please, operator, the appreciation. Srimati Aparajita Dasgupta, the author, Srimati Sharmila Tagore and Srimati Krishna Basu, I beg your pardon, to launch the book. Thank you so much. Krishna di kichu bolben? Bosho. Ashun. Apni boshe bolun. On আছে।
বইটা বাংলাতে, তাই বাংলাতেই বলছি দু এক কথা। উপস্থিত সজ্জনবৃন্দ আমার নমস্কার গ্রহণ করবেন। মঞ্চে রয়েছেন যারা, শর্মিলা আমার খুবই স্নেহের, আপনাদের সকলকে আমার আন্তরিক সশ্রদ্ধ নমস্কার জানাচ্ছি। অপরাজিতা যখন এর বইটা আমাকে দিল, আমার খুব কৌতূহল হলো, কারণ ও বলছে ওর ছেলেবেলার কথা লিখেছে। তা হবি তো আমিও একটা আমার নিজের ছেলেবেলার কথা জাস্ট লিখেছি, 2 সপ্তাহ আগে পাবলিশড হয়েছে। তাই আমার মনে হলো যে একটু দেখি ব্যাপারটা কি, কারণ আমি তো বলতে গেলে প্রিহিস্টোরিক যুগের লোক, because I am writing about the 30s and 40s and 50s, middle of 50s, Calcutta. And ও তো আমার পরের জেনারেশন, তাই নিশ্চয় একটা অন্যরকম নতুন কিছু আবার ওর ভেতরে পাওয়া যাবে, তাই আমার খুব কৌতূহল হচ্ছিল। তো one or two incidents or anecdotes that she has written আমাকে খুব টাচ করলো। প্রথমেই খুলে আমি দেখলাম ও লিখছে একটা খুব রোম্যান্টিক দেখা হওয়া on the terrace of a house between your grandfather and grandmother. ভীষণ রোম্যান্টিক, 1922। দেখা হওয়া মানে কি আর রোম্যান্টিক মানে কি? আগে ছবি দেখেছিলেন, they had seen each other's photographs, তাই দুজনের দিকে তাকালেন, একটু হাসলেন কি হাসলেন না, the bride যিনি তিনি দৌড়ে পালিয়ে গেলেন। তো কিন্তু the whole thing is so touching, you know. And it brought me back to my own day. লিখছে ওর দাদু দিদার কথা, আর আমার 1920-তে আমার পেরেন্টস দে গট ম্যারিড, এবং ওরকম রোম্যান্টিক কিছু দেখা হওয়ার সুযোগ ওদের হয়নি। তাই জন্য বাবা বলতেন যে হি গট ইন টু দ্য ট্রেন অ্যান্ড অ্যারাইভড ইন এ ভিলেজ, ইস্ট বেঙ্গল ভিলেজ, অ্যান্ড গট ইন টু এ প্যালাঙ্কুইন। পালকি চড়ে বর যাচ্ছে, আর বরের পাশাপাশি একটি ছোট্ট ছেলে ছুটতে ছুটতে যাচ্ছে। আমার মার ছোট ভাই, সে একটি বালক, আর হি ইজ গিভিং এ লিস্ট অফ অল দি ব্যাড থিংস দ্যাট হি নিউ অ্যাবাউট হিজ এল্ডার সিস্টার। আর বাঙাল ভাষায় তো বলতে বলতে যাচ্ছে ছর্দি এই করে, ছর্দি সেই করে। ছর্দির না ভীষণ ভোলা মন, চাবি হারাইয়া ফেলে। তো বাবা used to say later that he did suffer a lot from all those points, particularly চাবি হারাইয়া ফেলে, losing the keys, ওটাতে খুব অসুবিধা হয়েছিল। তবে 1920 একটা অন্যরকম ব্যাপারও ছিল। বিয়ের আসরে পুরোহিত বললেন, আমার মার নাম ছায়াময়ী, ছায়াময়ী দাসী। So my father protested and said, you shouldn't say dashi, it should be devi. And the priest said, look, you are kayastho, so I can't say devi, it is dashi. So things came to such a pass that the bridegroom was almost leaving the venue. So গ্রামের সজ্জনেরা মিলে আলোচনা করলেন, they discussed and decided যে এরা ক্ষত্রিয়, এদেরটা হতে পারে, চলতে পারে। So became a Kshatriya and my mother was called a Devi and not a Dashi. So you know, these things come back as I read Aparajita's book, which is very fine. You have another anecdote where আমাদের দেশে মেয়ে দেখা আছে, মেয়ে দেখতে এসেছেন অপর পক্ষ, তা ঠিক সোজাসুজি বানান টানান তো জিজ্ঞেস করা যাচ্ছে না, দুপক্ষই বেশ লিটারেরি এতে নামি ফ্যামিলি। তাই বললেন যে মা তোমার হাতের লেখাটা একটু দেখি, so why don't you write something? And the bride says, what should I write? She looks at her father, and the father recites a very difficult poem of Rabindranath Tagore. She is writing, why did she choose such a difficult poem with so many, you know, very hard spellings in it also? But she wrote, and everything was fine. And the two gentlemen looked at each other. It was actually a duel between them, not between the bride and the other side. My mother also went through such a thing when মেয়ে দেখা হলো, মেয়ে দেখতে এসেছিলেন, বললেন যে গান বাজনা জানো? হ্যাঁ। তো মা প্লেড দ্য এসরাজ, আয় তবে সহচরী হাতে হাতে ধরি ধরি, নাচিবি ঘিরি ঘিরি গাহিবি গান হলো। So okay, passed. And then পড়াশুনো কীরকম? So মা recited a poem, ওই বীর চূড়ামণি বীর বাহু চলি যাবে গেলা জমপুরে। So দেখতে এসেছিলেন মার অবশ্যই ফাদার ইন ল and মার দেওর brother-in-law Nirod Chaudhary, who became much famous later, কিন্তু at least she passed in recitation and that in this. So you see that what is the most important thing is when you read such a book, the time comes out through it. আমার বইটাকে আমি বলি একজন সাধারণ মেয়ের জীবন, কিন্তু আমরা অসাধারণ সময়ে জন্মেছিলাম। ন্যাচারালি ব্রিটিশ ডেজ, ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্স, পার্টিশন, riots, we went through all that, famine, and we grew up among that. So for an ordinary girl, but getting, you know, growing up in extraordinary times, that was a wonderful thing actually. And they are talking about post-colonial days, which is also extremely important. Post-colonial days ওরা বড় হচ্ছে, ও খুব সুন্দর করে লিখেছে, ওর গ্রামও নয় শহরও নয় এমন জায়গায় ছেলেবেলা। তারপরে they go to Cambridge. Cambridge is described very well. All the seasons of Cambridge are there beautifully. খুব ভালো বলেছো, খুব ভালো বলেছো এটা। আর তোমার এই যেটা লাস্ট পার্টি ইচ্ছের যেটা লিখেছো সেটা হচ্ছে ভবিষ্যৎ তোমার দেখিয়েছো in post-colonial days. Thank you very much, and I hope all of you will read Aparajita's book. Okay?
It's checking, okay, this is fine. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon session on women in the Tagore household. This promises to be a very engaging and intriguing session. While we sit here on the historical grounds of this grand piece of architecture, the Victoria Memorial, we are about to speak about another historical and cultural landmark of the city, the house of the Tagore family. Housed in North Kolkata, the Tagore family lived in Jurashako. The home which saw exceptional men and women, progressive in their own ways, paving the path of the Bengal Renaissance. The house which witnessed the transition from tradition to modernity, the drama played over religion, education, family equations. The house which in its many rooms played out creative projects by the prolific and talented Tagore children. The biggest narrative from Jurashako is always that of Rabindranath Tagore. And some of us know about the father and the brothers. But the book that we will discuss today unfolds the fascinating narratives of women in Tagore's household. Many characters, who to the average reader may have just been names in the Tagore family, are fleshed out in this fascinating historical novel spanning 80-odd years, little longer. So we have women from 4 generations, right from Dwarkanath and Digambari, right to Rabindranath's wife and his children and his nieces. And so there's an enormous amount to talk about, and I'd like to set the ball rolling and introduce, not really introduce, but welcome Sharmila Tagore, to this session, who is part of the Tagore family and who will be talking about her responses to the book. And I'd like to draw on her own memories of growing up in a joint family structure. And welcome Aruna Chakravarti, the writer of the book Jurashako, who's also very well known for her work on Sunil Gangopadhyay's translations, and she has a separate session on that. But let me start with you, Arunadi, because this is a book which has required such detailed research. I'd like to know what were your principal sources of research, really.
Before I speak about my sources, I'd just like to tell you what drew me to this, the theme first. What I used to find in my childhood, though I was born in Delhi, brought up in Delhi, but we were given a very strong sense of being Bengalis. A Bengali chauvinism was injected into us by our parents, and we're very proud to be Bengali. Bangali gorbo amra. We always felt great pride in being Bengali. And we were told about the great men of Bengal, the reformers, the writers, the poets, the musicians, and of course the Tagore family played a very important part in that education. But what told about most were, of course, Rabindranath, in his multifaceted, all his various facets as a composer, poet, educator, prose writer, etc. And of course, we knew about his father, Rabindranath, the founder of the Adi Brahmo Samaj, his grandfather, Dwarkanath, the prince, his brother, the first ICS. But what intrigued me was that we never were told anything about the women of the family. There was some little whisper somewhere. We knew that one of the daughters-in-law had committed suicide, and it was a little hush-hush, a dark streak in the Tagore history. But beyond that, we didn't know anything. But I've always been very interested in women from childhood onwards, in women's issues, how women lived, and I've been fascinated by the past. So somewhere, I think both these interests came together, and I wanted to write about the women of the Tagore family. Now, coming to your question, the sources, obviously a lot of research had to be done. And naturally, one goes to the secondary sources first. Now, in the secondary sources, Prashant Kumar Pal's book and Prabhat Mukhopadhyay's book, I found it was all about Rabindranath. Some stray mention of a woman, of the wives of his brothers or his own, sometimes. But they were very, very isolated. And I really found that didn't tell me anything about the women. But there were two books which were, and I'd like to, really, speak about my appreciation for those two books because they really helped me a lot. One was Chitra Dev's Thakur Badir Andor Mahal, from which at least I got a list of all the names and all the major events that happened to these women uh, from the Gombori onwards, right till Sharmila. But the other book, which was very useful, was a book called Rabindranath Attiyo Shajan. And that book not only gave these details, but they also gave me the dates uh, in the Roman calendar, which was very useful because it's very difficult for me to, to deal with the Bengali calendar. That, and it also gave some ideas of where the original material could be found. So then I turned to the original material and I found that many of the women had actually written about themselves. Small monographs, articles, and most of them I think were published in Bharati, the family magazine. So more or less these were my sources.
I'd like to turn to you, Sharmila Di, and ask what your response is to the first woman that we meet in this book too, in a detailed manner, and that's Digombori, about whom the writer says she was a wife, yet not a wife.
I actually, when I read the book, I really liked the book very much, Jora Shako, because I'd heard so much about the family from my grandmother and aunts and various people from the family. And yet, I really didn't know very many people. There were many gaps in the men were talked about quite a lot, but not the women. So I really appreciated this book. Before this, I had read Chitra Dev's book, and this book added to all that. And what I loved about it was there was a lot of facts, and yet it was written like a drama, like a novel, and there was so much interest, and there was and there was enough material, really. And coming back to your question of Digombori, who was Prince Dwarkanath's wife, and she was a very, very strong character. And at that time, I mean, she was a very, very religious person, and Dwarkanath was basically a businessman. He was traveling a lot. It was very necessary for him to interact with the British and entertain them. But he had promised his mother that he will not drink and he will not eat flesh, beef or whatever else. And he kept that promise. But after his mother died, he started entertaining much more and started doing all those things that he had promised that he will not do. So his wife got to know about it and didn't like it because she felt that he was going against his dharma and this wasn't right. So she called lots of people, lots of learned people, priests and people who were informed about religion and Shastra, and said, what am I supposed to do? Because my duty is to my husband, and I have to follow whatever he says. But at the same time, as a religious person, as a Brahmin, what is my duty? Should I carry on with him, or what do you suggest? So the priests were also, they had a problem. They didn't know how to advise her. So they conferred and discussed among themselves and came up with this, that it's all right to stay with him. You can continue to be his wife, but you cannot share his bed. And you look after him and advise him, but it has to stop there. So she thought about it, reflected on it, and that's exactly what she did. And she, yes, and then the priest says that if there is an accidental touch in then you have to do prayashchit, and you have to have Ganga Snan, like pouring Ganga water over yourself, or 7 ghadas of it, So she died of pneumonia, actually, because she continued to do this. And she was, the more that he entertained, I mean, he got quite upset with her. and there was a distance, and he spent more and more time away from the house. And at some stage, more he did that, the more penance that she performed, and it took a toll on her health. So she was a very strong person, believed, and also in some way she was doing all this for the spiritual welfare of her husband.
Can I ask you to read that section from the book?
Actually, it's very well written in the book. It's a bit long. I'd given you the background. So this is Digambari, Dwarkanath's wife. After when she goes to the Pandits with her question, the Pandits were nonplussed. They had heard that Digambari was a woman of great force of character and strength of mind. But this was not something they had expected to be called upon to debate. Dwarkanath had left the mansion built by his grandfather Nilmuni Tagore and moved with his family into the larger, grander one he had constructed adjacent to it. Though the two houses were looked upon as one, and the inmates had free access to both, with the aid of a common passage, the new house had a distinctive character. It came to be known as Boitok Khana Bari, owing to the lavish entertainments it saw. Here, Dwarkanath devised the most elegant balls and banquets for his British and native counterparts, in which the serving of meat, the free flow of wine and other liquor, and the diversions provided by singing and dancing